What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jay Rich here to bring you waivers across the NFL for fantasy football in week 6. Last week, we hit on a couple good ones with Mike Boone over Tyler Algier, and I think that one played out for everybody really well. I talked about the schedule for the Falcons, how bad it is. That will continue again this week, so make sure you keep an eye out because Tyler Algier might hit some waivers, and if you want to pick him up, go for it because he will have opportunity, but not the best opportunity overall. Mike Boone, in limited action, did score double-digit fantasy points, and I will be hitting on a couple other guys who have similar upside to Boone that maybe are a little bit under-owned in these fantasy leagues. I don't want to waste any more time, though. Let's dive right into the plays, starting with a couple of obvious ones right off the bat for some of the people in smaller leagues, aren't as deep. Let's talk about Kenneth Walker III, who will now be the starting running back for the Seattle Seahawks. Rachaad Penny, unfortunately, did break his fibula, and he is out for the season. So if Kenneth Walker is for some reason available in your leagues, make sure you pick him up. You have my full permission to unload the clip and spend all your fab on Kenneth Walker. Number 1 waiver priority pick this week if he's available in your leagues. Followed, of course, by Rhamondre Steveson. Had to mention him quickly. If Damian Harris misses any time with that hamstring injury, Rhamondre Steveson will crush, as you saw this week. So I wanted to mention both those guys just in case they weren't available. And the last one, of course, is Brian Robinson, who out-carried Antonio Gibson for the Washington Commanders. Not the best role to be in, starting running back for the Washington Commanders. Not great, but Brian Robinson, if he continues to carry the load for that offense, will have some games for sure, and definitely will be startable across multiple formats. Now, those are guys that were owned in about 50% of leagues, so I did want to touch on them briefly, and if they are available, go and pick them up. But the guy that I think can be someone down the stretch that could be useful for you, especially with bye weeks, let's quickly touch on those bye weeks. The Detroit Lions, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Tennessee Titans, and the Houston Texans. So your big guys you want to fill in are DeAndre Swift, who probably wasn't going to play anyways, and then potentially Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, and as well, actually, might as well mention him, Dameon Pierce. So these are the 3 running backs you're looking to replace this week, and a guy that I think could replace one of them potentially is Rachaad White, the backup running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's been getting more and more involved week in and week out, and the past 2 weeks he's had 9 targets overall. He's also been getting some work carrying the ball. And of course, if there's an injury to Leonard Fournette, he will be a guy you want to have on your rosters. This week, they play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we all saw what happened to them against the Buffalo Bills, so we could see some more work from Rachaad White in this one. I think he's a very viable flex option, potentially even RB2, RB3 this week. Go pick up Rachaad White. I think you can try and sneak him through your waivers. Don't spend a ton of money on him, 5%, maybe 10% at most. Again, he's not the starter, but he is a guy that can fill in for some of these bye weeks and is a viable option and does catch passes in the passing game. So if you're playing PPR leagues in particular, that's where you really want them. Standard leagues, not going to be as valuable. But in those PPR leagues, which a lot of us are playing in now, it has become more the norm. Definitely go and pick him up. Now, going to wide receivers, I'm going to be talking about Patriots wide receiver Jakobi Meyers, a player that I was definitely concerned about with the transition to Bailey Zappi due to Mac Jones' ankle injury. But Jakobi Meyers had no problems against the Detroit Lions. I think he's a guy that's at this point probably QB proof, whether it's Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi. I think you can start him with some confidence for sure. And you saw what he did this week: 7 receptions, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Has Cleveland, Chicago, the Jets, and Indianapolis before the bye. So he does have some decent matchups, and I think Jakobi Meyers, while pretty widely owned, could be an option for you if you have a receiver on bye this week. So he'd be my number 1 pickup, and he is, again, available in not too many leagues, but I figured I'd mention him briefly. Now let's get into some deeper guys, and let's talk about Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce has had 60 yards in each of his games this season that he's played. He did miss week 2, but he's looking like a legitimate option for the Indianapolis Colts. We've seen the success of wide receiver 2s for Matt Ryan. We know that Michael Pittman is a stud, but Alec Pierce, for better or worse, people may not admit it, he is starting to get some of that work that normally goes to Michael Pittman, and it's because he's playing so well. He's earned the trust of Matt Ryan. He continues to be heavily involved in that offense, and with these negative game scripts that the Colts seem to find themselves in every game, we're probably going to see more and more passing work and more from Alec Pierce down the stretch. He's a rookie wide receiver, super fast, big, athletic, and can make plays, and he shows that week in and week out. I believe that there's a really good chance that Alec Pierce can be a guy you flex, especially when it comes to bye weeks. He's very low owned. I believe he's under 10%. I'd be willing to pick up Alec Pierce depending on your team and how deep it is. More of a deeper play, but definitely worth a look in my opinion. He should be a guy that's probably 15 to 20% owned after this week. I just believe in Alec Pierce. I think he's a great talent. I think he's a phenomenal wide receiver. And I think earning that trust of Matt Ryan is key. He led the team in targets, receptions, and receiving yards this past week. And on Thursday Night Football, he might be a little bit overlooked. Again, another guy you maybe want to spend around 5% of fab on, maybe even less than that, a couple bucks here or there to try and get him on your roster, because I think he will be worth it down the stretch. Now, a guy that I definitely think you should be looking at, we talked about Isaiah McKenzie last week and why you wanted him on your rosters. Unfortunately, he was not available in this week. He was out with a concussion. And I didn't mention on this show that you should be looking at Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir, the rookie wide receiver out of Boise State, played out of his mind. We talk about a guy who is stepping into the slot, playing that number 3 role in the offense. We know how much Josh Allen likes to target the slot. Shakir was awesome. I believe he caught 3 passes, 75 yards, and one of which was a touchdown. If you picked him up and you played him in your deep leagues, you were rewarded. Again, the Steelers are god-awful. They keep allowing a ton of points and yards to the wide receiver position. I'm all in on Shakir if you're in a deep league. Not saying go pick him up everywhere. He's probably going to be the wide receiver 4 in this offense going forward, especially assuming Isaiah McKenzie is back this week against Kansas City. But even still, if you're in a deep enough league, 14-team, 16-team, Shakir is a guy that you want to have on your roster in the same ways that we're not dropping Jamison Crowder because he's in a bit of a timeshare with McKenzie. Because again, if somehow one of these guys gets this role, he's going to be very good. We've seen it with McKenzie. We've now seen it with Shakir stepping in that same number 3 role. That number 3 role is valuable, and you want to have a piece of that offense if you can get it. He's only like 2% owned, deep leagues only, but if he is available out there and you want to take the shot on him, maybe you think Isaiah McKenzie's not going to come back this week, definitely Khalil Shakir is the name to know in Buffalo. So make sure you take a look at him, because he could be an option, again, if McKenzie misses any more time due to injury. Now let's get to tight end. I mean, I don't need to really talk about Taysom Hill. I believe he's the number 4 player in fantasy this week, completely breaking the tight end landscape, completely breaking fantasy football. The thing is, though, is I don't know if I would go out and spend a ton of money on him. I believe that if you want to spend like 5% of fab on him to try and get him on your roster because your team's asleep, they're not paying attention, they don't even really pay attention to Taysom Hill, I think it's worth it. But the reality is that he's going to be very inconsistent. And so the problem is do you really want to go out and spend all this money on a guy who just put up a ton of points? Yes. Tight end is awful. Yes. But I think he's still going to be a boom bust player. So there is a chance that someone is like, oh, Taysom Hill's the best. He's going to break fantasy. I'm going to win with him. And that could fully happen. But the problem is that there is a real chance that he isn't so good for fantasy and he kind of just stinks it up and people end up dropping him again because he's going to be inconsistent. At best, Taysom Hill is a boom bust tight end who doesn't really play tight end, let's be real, but he's designated a tight end, so you can put him in your tight end spot, and he's a boom bust guy. The same way I talked about Will Dissly being a boom bust tight end, he's the same type of guy. Except the problem is that he plays less snaps than even most tight ends do. He only played about 30% of snaps. I think this week was his highest at 33%. He only carried the ball 9 times at 100 yards. Yes, he scored 3 touchdowns, but he's not going to be this efficient every week. You're banking on him scoring a touchdown like you are with a lot of tight ends, but I don't know if I'd be blowing my fab on Taysom Hill. The guy that I actually prefer this week more than anybody else is Evan Engram. Evan Engram has had a bit of an up and down season so far, and you see the way he's played in this offense, but this past week, 10 targets. We like that. In a close game against the Houston Texans, I really think Engram can be a guy who consistently gets targets for you. So again, a guy who can actually be reliable and counted on to get the volume week in and week out. He runs a lot of routes. We've seen the way he complements Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. I think Evan Engram is a guy that maybe not everyone's on right now because he has been up and down, but you may be able to get him on your rosters. I think he's a guy that has a definite chance to have a good week. They play the Colts this week, so that is working in their favor. The Colts defense we know isn't that great, and Engram could be a guy that helps take that offense over the top. So for me, I'd be looking more at Evan Engram than Taysom Hill. It's just, to me, I don't want to be chasing these big weeks. Taysom Hill had an awesome week. We're very thankful for it if you have him on your best ball teams, but most people did not. And so for that, you just don't want to be chasing those points, especially spending a lot of fab on him. Again, Taysom Hill's still the priority waiver guy, but that doesn't mean you go spending all your money on him. I would be looking at Evan Engram as another guy you could sneak through because I think he's got a slightly better option and definitely more things going for him this week. Now, as far as quarterbacks go, we're looking at streamers. We're starting with Jimmy Garapolo, who had a great week this week against Carolina. I think he can do it again against Atlanta. We've seen what the Falcons have given up over the past, season so far. 5 weeks in, they're awful. Jimmy G could get it done again. there is always the chance that they decide to run the ball a ton, and that's fully possible, but Jimmy G's not going to stink it up for you. If you're in a really deep league and you kind of need a QB starter for the week, I think Jimmy Garapolo is a fine, safe option. Not necessarily the boom player, but definitely a guy that does have some upside like we've seen playing for a great Niners offense. And the other guy, I hate to say it, you're not going to like it, it's Justin Fields. Justin Fields coming off the best passer rating game of his entire career up against the Washington Commanders this week. He is a guy that really could boom and have a really good game for you against the Commanders. We know how bad they are, giving up a ton of points. Now, they may, again, run the ball a lot, which is not great for us for fantasy, but they've shown the ability to trust Justin Fields a little bit more, throwing the ball more downfield, getting him more passes, and I believe there's a really good shot that he does have a good game this week. It is a Thursday night football game, so that is worth noting. But if you want to start Justin Fields, you do have my blessing. I know it's gross, I know it's not fun, but I do think there's a real shot he has a good game in this one. Again, it is the Commanders, so there's always a chance for a big game. We've seen a lot of teams put up a lot of points against the Commanders, and more importantly, a lot of quarterbacks have really good games against them. So that is the waiver show. As quick as possible as I can possibly get through it. Ken Walker, Rhamondre Steveson, Brian Robinson, Rachaad White at running back, Jakobi Meyers, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir at wide receiver, Taysom Hill and Evan Engram at tight end, and then Jimmy Garapolo and Justin Fields as QB streamers of the week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you drop me a like and subscribe. Let me know down below if you have any more questions or who you want to be picking up on waivers if I didn't mention them. We could talk about Michael Gallo. We could talk about a few other guys, but these are the guys I like based off matchup, based on how they're performing and how they're trending. So let me know in the comments what you guys think for this week, who you're picking up, who you're starting, who you're sitting, and maybe who you're dropping. Maybe you're dropping Cam Akers. Maybe you're dropping Tyler Algier because of the schedule. I don't know. Let me know what you guys are doing down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will be back next week with more waivers, more takes. Appreciate you guys so much, and I'll see you guys later. I'm out. Peace.